Welcome back, folks. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of This Week in CAA Football presented by GEICO. I'm Bobby Broyles, joined by this guy, Tim McDonald. Sir, we are 6 weeks down with 7 weeks remaining in the regular season. You mentioned on the podcast last week that the league is starting to separate a bit into tiers. Yep. Well, after this past Saturday, it looks like that theory may be true here at the unofficial halfway point of the season.
We saw a couple of teams last week distance themselves. We saw UNH and Villanova specifically take care of business. UNH on the road, 48-0 after 3 quarters versus Elon. They get it done. Villanova, what a win at Maine. Again, it was close at the halftime, 21-13, but Villanova in the second half just pulled away. John Robertson again, skip the record skipping again. He threw 4 touchdowns for the 3rd straight week. He did throw a pick, so he is human. I will say that. Human. 16 touchdowns versus 1 interception this year. Of course, you look at that UNH game. I was impressed by UNH's ability to, it's a shame for Elon to open up CAA football play like that. Mm-hmm. But I was impressed by UNH's defense again. The first 4 possessions for Elon, it turned into 3 and outs. Mm-hmm. And Villanova, again, just what can you say? Of course, William Mary had the bye week. Yep. William Mary had time to recoup. A huge game this week, which we'll get into soon. Mm-hmm. And again, the jury's still out on Albany. We know it was a very tough loss. They score a young bull. Omar Osborne scores with under a minute left. JMU comes down. A very smart play on special teams that kind of saves the day. They get another shot at a game-winning field goal kick and get it in JMU. A big win for them. Now they're even, and their first loss of the season for UAlbany. Again, it was a busy week, but again, I think it's starting to separate itself.
Well, this leads us to what I think is not just the game of the week in CAA football, but all of FCS.
I agree with you.
New Hampshire, sitting at number 4 in the Sports Network poll, plays host to number 10, William & Mary. And Tim, this is a nationally televised game, a 5-star matchup on NBC Sports Network at 3:30.
Turn on the bright lights. Like you said, it's a top 10 matchup. This is a game where historically everyone looks at this matchup and looks at William & Mary because they've dominated the series. Yep. The last time UNH got a win in this series was in 2012. That was also at home. That's actually the first win under Sean McDonald that UNH has had in this series versus William & Mary. That just goes to show you how well the Tribe have played versus that offense. Let's remember last year, William & Mary took care of business 17-0 at home versus UNH. It's hard to shut out UNH. Yes. It's very hard to do that.
Very impressive.
And that, I'm sure a lot of UNH players remember that. Mm-hmm. This is a matchup, too, where you say, defense versus offense. I'd say not so fast. Both these teams are very good, and they're very well coached. William & Mary lost FBS opener Virginia Tech. UNH lost its FBS opener to Toledo. Both of those teams since then have had a bye week and have also won 4 straight games. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at the offensive line. When you look at this William & Mary versus New Hampshire matchup, it always comes down to that. Riley, the defensive end for William & Mary, has had monster games in his history against UNH. I think that's going to be key for New Hampshire to protect Andy Vallis. Anderson and Abdul Sabor, the running backs for William & Mary, have combined for 8 rushing touchdowns this year. And we've seen what Cluey, the quarterback for William & Mary, he's just become more comfortable week in and week out with this offense. If you're New Hampshire, 3rd down efficiency is going to be key. 4th in the FCS, 56.3%. Tied for the CAA football lead this season with 13 rushing touchdowns as well, I might add. Expect New Hampshire to try to set the tone on the ground, but I'm gonna warn you, if New Hampshire can't get anything going on the ground and William & Mary forces them to pass, they're going to be in trouble. On the other hand, William & Mary is going to try to set the tone on the ground first as well. Again, I think the advantage, slight advantage goes to UNH just because they're playing at home. UNH has won 17 of their last 18 in the dungeon. Yep. 8 straight games in the dungeon they've also won. Again, William & Mary has a bye week. You'd like to think that extra bye week is only going to help them prepare, but it should be a heck of a matchup.
And it should be well attended to. New Hampshire homecoming.
Homecoming, true. That's the only game at New Hampshire where you can say to yourself, okay, there's probably going to be over 9,000 people.
Yep. So also that game will also be available on NBC Sports Extra online. The JMU Dukes, coming off that big win at UAlbany, return to Bridgeforth to host Towson, a team which is searching for answers on offense.
JMU entered that game at Albany last week kind of as an underdog in a surprising state, yes. And they got it done. I was impressed with Vadley, again, as always, as I am. 111 yards rushing, still 17 attempts. That was pretty high for him. Mm-hmm. He had a big 57-yard touchdown early to get JMU back in the game. JMU still averages 243 yards per game rushing, which is, that's just a nightmare for teams to stack up against. Where you look at Towson last week, another tough loss. Now they're 0-2 in CAA football play, which confidence-wise is just very, very tough for this team, especially we always look back to last year, but especially a lot of the players from that team, the younger guys remember what it was like last year, and now they're 0-2 in CAA football play. Yep. Again, a great opportunity for Towson to go on the road and show people what you're made of. I look at Towson's offense last week. Darius Victor had found so much success leading up to that game, and he was stifled to 59 yards rushing, and that really hurt Towson offensively. They couldn't get much going. Again, only 3 points in their game last week. 12 tackles for loss Stony Brook had last week against Towson. I think that was key in that game. The offensive line just got beat up. Again, a great opportunity for Towson, but also a great opportunity for JMU. JMU's 3-3 right now. If they can get this win at home, remember the last time they were at home versus Delaware, offensively they weren't all in tune. I think it's going to change this week. I think it should be a good game.
That contest will kick off at 12:30 live on Comcast Sportsnet and CA.TV. The CA Football on-campus crew will be on the main line this weekend when Villanova welcomes Rhode Island to Philly at 1.
You know, it's already a scary matchup for Villanova, not just to think about Robertson and how well he's thrown the ball over the last couple of weeks, but Villanova also leads the CAA in rushing yards per game, 245 yards. So on top of having to worry about John Robertson and the weapons, might I add, last week he threw 4 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers. It's just a nightmare matchup. He's got Chupacabra on the outside. You know my boy Poppy Livers. Poppy Livers, excuse me. And it's just Kevin Monangai and Underwood have both scored 4 rushing touchdowns this year. So if you're Rhode Island, you have to deal with this game and you have to go on the road and say, all right, we need to forget last week. They lost a tough game to Brown, 20-13. Rhodey was in that game, 17-13 in the fourth quarter. Brown has a 19-play drive that ate up a lot of clock, and that ultimately determined the game. They kicked a field goal with a couple minutes left, win that game. It's a tough loss for Rhodey, and it's a tough circumstance for Rhodey to have to go to the main line right now and play John Robertson. Again, Villanova, I don't think they will look ahead because they can't afford to look ahead, but let's remember who they play next week at William & Mary.
At William & Mary. Yep, and one big blow to the Villanova office. Ernest Pedway out for the season.
Oh, the tight end, that's right. Andy said that. That was kind of surprising.
Yes, so we should see who may be replacing him at that position this weekend. We will have more details on our trip to Nova later on at 3:30. Richmond hits the road to take on the Great Danes of UAlbany, who look to bounce back after losing their first game of the season.
And I'm going to give you a stat here. Richmond last week ran the ball with Seth Fisher 23 times. And if you told me going into the year that Richmond would even have a game where they attempted one running back with 23 attempts, you'd probably be surprised.
Very surprised.
Seth Fisher, Danny Rocco said it this week in the call, he just kind of got it done. He kind of said, give me the ball, I'm going to get it done. Scores twice in overtime, eventually scores the game winner. More impressive about that win at Liberty, it was a record crowd versus Liberty. Liberty's a really hard place to win.
Yes.
Give credit to Richmond. They almost lose the game thanks to, they give up a 60-yard field goal as time expires. The game goes into overtime. At that point, Liberty scores in 2 plays into overtime, and at that point you're thinking, wow, how did the momentum just change?
Yeah.
Give credit to Richmond. They fought back, they battled back, and their defense gets it done with an interception late at Liberty. Again, a tough game for UAlbany to bounce back to. It's amazing how much a week makes a difference because you look at UAlbany last week, they're playing JMU, they're still undefeated. All of a sudden, they're back at home, but they're playing Richmond. Offensively, think about what they've had to prepare for the last couple of weeks. We know Omar Osborne and UAlbany, the top 5 in the league in rushing. They're going to get it done. He's going to get his carries and he's going to get his yards. He scored twice last week, had over 100 yards again for the 4th time this season. Still, UAlbany, another tough matchup. Defensively, Coach Gattuso said in the call this week they missed a lot of assignments. I expect UAlbany to sharpen up a little bit, but still another test, and it should be a good game.
Also at 3:30, Elon plays their first league road game in Newark versus Delaware.
And we mentioned what a tough, opening CAA football game it was for Elon last week. Didn't really, play that well at home against a tough opponent in New Hampshire. Then you have Delaware, also a team last week that comes into this game playing, a poor performance at home. They lost to Sacred Heart in a game that, we said it was probably going to be a trap game. Yeah. Not a trap game, but probably a game that was relatively close. And, that's a tough loss for Delaware to get over mentally. But again, I'd say let's relax a little bit. Just at the end of the day, yes, it's a loss, and yes, it was a bad loss at home. You only score 7 points, but it's a non-conference opponent. You have a great chance right now. Really, at the end of the day, all that matters are CAA football wins. And Delaware, you can still get that done. You're still 1-0 in CAA football play. Amazingly, Delaware scored 7 points last week, and the first play of the game was a 79-yard touchdown run. So after that, offensively, they just struggled. I'm expecting Elon to kind of go into this game knowing, all right, well, we struggled last week against New Hampshire. Our defense really couldn't get off the field. Kind of switch it up and just keep progressing. You just got to keep moving. Another tough environment, but it's a new environment too. It's going to be fun to go to Delaware Stadium if you're Elon. It's great that you're finally getting accustomed to these CAA football games. I expect Delaware to get the job done at home just because of the way that they played last week.
The nightcap features Maine at Stony Brook at 7 o'clock on the American Sports Network. This one expects to be another defensive-dominated contest, Tim.
Maine really was in that game in the first half, first Towson last week. Like I said, 21-13 at the half. Again, the youth of this team and the inconsistency kind of bled through in the second half, and they gave up some big plays, and Maine ultimately fell through. Stony Brook, heck of a job last week to earn the win at Towson. They got it done. Stacey Bedell and James Kenner, the running backs, were a great 1-2 punch last week. Stony Brook turned the ball over 3 times last week at Towson, but came back and fought through. That's their second straight win in CAA football, dating back to last year. So again, Stony Brook, another great chance, and Maine, a very tough one for them last week. But I'm going to see which team responds for both.
All right. Well, CAAfootball.com will have television clearance information this week, and CA.TV will once again simulcast Comcast Sportsnet's coverage of Saturday's contest between James Madison and Towson. You can also watch the UNH versus William & Mary game online via NBC Sports Live Extra.
And it's the same spiel for me every week, Bob, it seems, but I got to tell the people you can find CAA Football on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram by searching CAA Football and using our hashtag CAAFP.
CAA Football's Going Deep series highlighted the work Elon is doing to prepare athletes for life after college last week. Head over to our blog, caafootball.wordpress.com, to watch all the on-campus content from Elon.
It was really exciting to see Elon's campus. It was beautiful last weekend, Bob, and it's great to see what they're doing off the field. I definitely suggest that people go check that out. And like we said earlier in the show, the CAA.TV crew will be in Philly for the Villanova game this Saturday between the Wildcats and the Rhody Rams, and you can stay on the blog for all the coverage from our trip and tune in next Tuesday for a Going Deep feature on that Villanova team.
And don't forget about the Yak.
It's true.
Tim, I'm not talking about your yards after catch, playing backyard two-hand touch.
Still pretty good there, so that's fine.
I'm talking about the new podcast where Tim, Alex, and I go more in-depth around the league. We will also welcome special guest Brian Ewert, who covers Villanova, and national beat writer Craig Haley from the Sports Network. Catch the podcast on the blog tomorrow. That is all from us for today. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of This Week in CAA Football.